In the end of Act Two of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, Tom Stoppard is replaying for us that scene from the play Hamlet where Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are asking Hamlet to tell them where the body of Polonius is and also follow them to King Claudius. Hamlet makes this mention of a sponge. He calls, I think it is Rosencrantz, a sponge, and he says, and this is, of course, both in this play and in Hamlet, "I, sir, that soaks up the king's countenance, his rewards, his authorities. But such officers do the king best service in the end. He keeps them like an ape in the corner of his jaw, first mouthed to be last swallowed. When he needs you, what you have gleaned, it is but squeezing you, and a sponge, you shall be dry again." In other words, just like minor characters, they haven't got a lot of worth. They don't have a lot of value. And once they've been used for the purpose that they are intended for, they'll probably be discarded. It is essentially what happens, and so you need to see the symbolism of how a sponge and a minor character are alike. You see that in this play through Shakespeare's words, whereas just in Shakespeare's play, he's just criticizing them for being spies. This is that scene where Hamlet says, "The body is with the king, but the king is not with the body. The king is a thing." "A thing, my lord?" That's what Guildenstern says. "Of nothing. Bring me to him." Hamlet is completely unafraid of Claudius, but he refers to Claudius as nothing. To me, that's what death is. It's been this way throughout this entire play. It's playing on the idea of to be or not to be, to exist or not to exist. That's what death is. If you are a thing of nothing, you're dead. So Hamlet does follow them, but of course Rosencrantz and Guildenstern can't leave the stage. And so instead of everybody leaving, they sort of just come in and find Claudius, I guess, comes in, and they sort of leap up. Now, this is still a scene from Shakespeare's Hamlet, and Claudius is upset. But let's go ahead and skip that and move on to the point where you have this scene where Hamlet is sort of talking to a soldier. We blend from this Claudius scene to the scene where Hamlet has talked to a soldier about the forces of Norway. And what happens here is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are still with him, but this is that scene right before he is sent away to England. This represents a change in attitude for Hamlet, but Rosencrantz and Guildenstern aren't really aware of it. Now this act, Act 2, ends very differently than Act 1. Remember, Act 1 didn't really end, but this time it ends in a blackout. Now that's actually important too. There's something symbolic about death, about the stage actually blacking out. In Act 3, we go to that part of the play Hamlet where Hamlet is gone. He's left. He's on a boat for England. Now he'll come back a little bit later after Ophelia dies and a few other things, but while he's not in his own play, Hamlet is on this boat. Now, most of his time on the boat, he doesn't have any lines. And that's appropriate because Hamlet can't have lines if he's not in his own play. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have their questions, and they begin Act 3 asking each other questions. But essentially, they're asking each other questions about the nature of their existence. One thing that we know is they're on a boat. But there are a couple of layers of symbolism, not really symbolism. Well, I guess it is. These are metaphors. See, I think as I read this, the analogy has to be that being on a boat is quite like being on a stage. And if you see the connection between those two things, you're off to a good start. Now, I've often said that the most famous line in Shakespeare is to be or not to be. And that probably is true. But the most famous metaphor in all of Shakespeare is that all the world is a stage. Now we have a couple of layers to that analogy. All the world is a stage, and a stage in Act 3 is a boat. So, Act 3 begins on a boat, and I want you to really consider the idea that being on a boat is very much like being on a stage. When the scene begins, or when the act begins, they are in complete darkness. And because they're in complete darkness, they're afraid that they're dead. Or maybe they want to be dead. They keep asking, we're not finished then, because they know that they, on some level or another, still exist. In other words, they're still sort of in the play, but they've left the stage of the play. They're moving further and further away from Elsinore, where all the action of the play takes place. And they can sense that, but they also can sense that they're not done with. They still have a function. They're going to, even though they'll never come back to Elsinore, I mean, they're obviously on their way to England to die. Even though they're not coming back to the play, they're still sort of vocally part of the play. So they say things like, we're not finished then. And they do get this sense. There's this phrase that they know that they'll be released when it, notice the vague pronoun it, which really refers to the play Hamlet. They know that they'll be finished when it is over. Asking each other if they're dead, Rosencrantz says, you can still think, can't you? And if you can think, you're not really dead. At least that's what Descartes thinks. It's the idea of cognito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. They sense their existence because they are beings that think. But this is also a part of the play that's full of puns, because they're lying there in darkness, and one of them says, my leg feels dead. Now that's a funny line right there. We all know what it means. It means his leg feels asleep. But it's not. He says it's dark, isn't it? But it's not dark for night. It's only dark for day. But they are headed north, and you should think about the symbolic significance of the fact that they're going north. And going north, I mean, we were already in Elsinore, so we were Denmark, so we were pretty far north anyway. But you should think about the idea that we're continuing to go north. If you want to, what I usually have kids do when I'm teaching this play is look at page 100 and 101 and replace the word boat with the word stage. It's interesting. And you have to remember that they're waiting for something, much like in Godot. But instead of waiting for Godot, in this play, they're waiting to be cut loose. He says it several times, and yet we have not been cut loose. From what? The play. You usually cut a boat loose. Well, never mind that. Anyway, the other thing that's happening in Act 3 is Hamlet's just sound asleep. He does have this little sort of like stage direction thing where he switches the letters, but of course he's not going to have any lines in this part of the play. Guildenstern looks at him sleeping and he's kind of jealous. It's like, it's all done for him. He's finished. He's not really finished, but it seems that way. The other pun that Tom Stoppard keeps playing with is England. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern both, especially Rosencrantz, really fears the idea that when they get to England, they won't know what to do and they won't know what to say. Rosencrantz says that he doesn't believe in it. And by it, he kind of means England, or at least that's the way Guildenstern takes it. Not even England? I don't believe in it anyway. And Guildenstern says, what? England? And then Guildenstern, not really understanding, it's like, you think it's just a conspiracy of cartographers? You mean they just put it on the map just because? And it's important because England's not really a part of the play Hamlet. They're never really supposed to do anything there or say anything there. But that's where they meet their end. That's where they die. This is what he says. I'm on the top of page 108. To picture us arriving, a little harbor perhaps, some roads, inhabitants to point the way, horses on the road, riding for a day or a fortnight, and then a palace and an English king. That would be the logical kind of thing. But my mind remains a blank. We're slipping off the map. In other words, there's no real thoughts or images or things, or there's no story about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in England. And when he says we're slipping off the map, he really means that we're slipping off the stage or out of the play. They seem to be migrating away from it. They can't conceive of these things in England or even England itself because it's not part of the story. Think about the pun. Rosencrantz says, do you think death could possibly be a boat? No, no, no. Death is not. Death isn't. Do you take my meaning? Death is the ultimate negative. Not being. You can't not be on a boat or a stage. Think about that. You can't not be on a stage. Rosencrantz says, I've frequently not been on boats. No, 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 no. What you've been is not on boats. I think the idea that the boat is equal to, when you substitute the word stage for boat, we get a new meaning here. And I think it's what Tom Stoppard intends. There's this, they pretend to have a conversation with the King of England. Like they're going to show up there. They don't know what to say. So they sort of like pretend, okay. He says, all we have to go on is what people tell us. So let's look at the stage directions on page 111. That's Hamlet exchanging the letters. But we know about that from the play Hamlet. And then the players themselves, the other actors, because they're leaving the story also, they sort of show up on the boat. So why are they there? Same reason Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are. They've left Elsinore, they're on their way somewhere else. And then Hamlet gets kidnapped by the pirates. Well, now they're stuck on the boat and they don't even have the function or the purpose of taking Hamlet to England. You also have the scene where Guildenstern murders the player. But it reminds me of the scene in Jean-Paul Sartre's play No Exit. You know, when one of the actors stabs another one. She can't die. She's already dead. In this play, of course you can kill the player, and he dies gloriously. But it's a stage death. He gets up and takes a bow. That's what death on a stage is. Anyway, I'm going to talk about the very end of the play the next time I see you. I've put an assignment for you all on haiku. So after you're done watching this video, I want you to work independently on the writing assignment that I've given you. I do miss you guys. Good luck on your IOCs today, and I wish you all the best.